love coming to this event and this summit to network and partner with, similar companies. I think it's a excellent way to grow as a business and a great way to expand your customer base. We're a huge believer in leveraging a vendor partner network to be able to service our clients and to be able to bring on new opportunities. And I think anybody who's really had true success in the business for any sort of sustainable amount of time kind of has the similar approach. And in regards to this topic in particular, I'm really excited about this because, I've gotten to speak with each one of these folks here today and a little bit yesterday. And, a lot of times, especially us as like a smaller ITAD provider, our foot in the door with clients is how do we take care of their problems, and a lot of times those problems are international. Hey, we've got a good handle on things here in the States, but could you really help us out with, international, ABC locations, and that's where you bring value to your client, and that's a lot of times how you get your foot in the door and how you're able to provide great value and service, and that's what we do, and that's what we look to do with our partners, like I said, not only in the States, but throughout the world, and so I'm particularly myself really, have a lot of interest in this topic. So I'm looking forward to get started here. I'm going to introduce or just kind of name off each person. They're going to handle their own introduction. I've got Oliver Mason with CoSycle. I got Faye Thomas here with Vita, and Ethan Lancaster with Renew IT. So I'll let each one of them introduce themselves, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Ed. So I'm Oliver Mason, Managing Director of CoSycle. CoSycle are a UK-based ITAD and managed service provider, focused very much on sustainability and data security at the end of the IT lifecycle.
Hi, I'm Faye Thomas. I'm from Vita. Vita is a managed service lifecycle provider with operations in the UK and Ireland. We have sites in Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and in Great Britain. We're heavily accredited R2 certification at DISA, which I'll hopefully mention a bit later, and can carry out services across the UK, Ireland, and Western Europe.
That leaves me. My name is Ethan Lancaster. I'm the Head of Operations and ESG at Renew IT. Renew IT, an IT asset lifecycle management provider in Australia and New Zealand. We have the most R2 facilities in the Southern Hemisphere.
Nice, great. So let's start off, just a question to kind of kick things off for each one of you. What particular insights do you have on the markets that you serve that are unique to those of us kind of here based in the US as far as, challenging locations, regions, communication challenges, kind of those type of things?
Sure. I'll tackle that initially. So, I mean, take your pick over recent times. There's been those global challenges such as the pandemic that we've all faced, but at a localized level, we've seen other things such as Brexit. So that's the UK leaving the European Union and the regulatory change that comes with that, as well as Brexit. And I'm sure you guys are all following the conflict at the moment over in Ukraine and Russia, having again an impact both on the buying cycle, but also our ability to operate in those regions. I think from a regulatory standpoint, and it's worth kind of pointing out that, what do our partners from North America look for in CoSycle, and using CoSycle as your local partner for the UK and Europe, it tends to be alignment and adherence to two key directives. Now that's the WEEE directive and GDPR. WEEE is on the side of the waste electrical and electrical equipment, so how you recycle stuff effectively, how you ensure 0% to landfill. GDPR is on the data side of things. So in terms of GDPR and the mitigation of risk, when we look at GDPR as a whole, the fines that are in place, it's one of the strictest regulations around the world around data security. So if you fall foul of GDPR, you're talking about a 2% fine in line with revenue, or 10 million euros, whichever is the highest. So I think that in itself has changed the landscape somewhat, particularly on the international partnership side, right? Quite often we're being asked for rebate value, equipment value, and of course we'll always try and maximize that. But the reality is, all of the remarketing in the world will not pay for a data breach. So at the forefront needs to be the data security aspect, and then, of course, looking at the maximizing the rebate side of things.
Great. Faye?
So, as Ollie says, there's been a number of issues that have changed everything over the last few years. But I suppose for Vita, we're in a unique position due to Brexit. We are based in Northern Ireland. Our head office is in Northern Ireland, which in effect is in both the UK and in the EU. So it means that we don't have the same restrictions that other organisations in the UK face in relation to transportation and movement of people, data and equipment across the borders. So that would really be the main one for me.
Sure. Ethan?
We have an interesting one. So whilst this war that Oliver mentioned is going on in Ukraine, we haven't necessarily been directly impacted by that other than the supply chain issues. Our main challenges that we face would more so be the population spread of the country. We're a country similar size to America with a population of Texas. So, we've got 6 states and there's only 3 main trading hubs on the east and 1 on the west. The cost of freight is through the roof, and you know what? Our regulations aren't where they need to be. So our job as Renew IT across Australia and New Zealand is to attend conferences like these, partner with like-minded organisations to really drive that regulatory change across both Australia and New Zealand.
Great, excellent. I'm going to start off with here with questions for each one of you now moving forward. Oliver, how do you ensure the scope of any service are agreed beforehand and that clear lines of responsibility are established, monitored, and reported on?
Okay, yeah, so I think part of that is being fortunate to have a fantastic team. So at CoCycle, we have a very well-experienced project management team. They're involved in the outset of those engagements. Like I think you and I were talking before, Ed, via email. For me, there's a massive focus on trust and transparency. We should be proud of our downstream partners. We should be proud of the part they play to support our clients. I think the days of white labeling your sub-processor are outdated, and ultimately we should be at the forefront speaking to our clients about why we're using and partnering with that provider. I've had some fantastic conversations here over the last couple of days around partnerships, and I'll be proud to present them to our clients. In the same way, we want our partners to be proud to present us to their clients. So a lot of it comes down to having that joint communication, making sure that when we're scoping projects and understanding the capacity of that project, our part to play in the project, that the client knows who we are and what we're doing. And then building clear documentation. I pride CoCycle on our documentation standards because I believe if it's written down, it's tangible, it can be delivered. So building SOWs with clear assumptions, dependencies, caveats, and everyone being accountable. And I think on that final point, for me, a valuable part of all of our documentation is our change control. We know projects change, and we know the scope of projects change, and therefore there has to be flexibility in the project. But that communication path to the client, and we all know those clients with a PO first policy, once they've written that PO, there's no way of getting more money out of them. We need to make sure there's a clear escalation path for when that project scope changes, and it can be agreed upon and actioned. So I think, back to the question, I think ultimately, for me, it's making sure that there's that joint communication strategy, we document things effectively, and we work to win together. And, me and Faye were talking about this yesterday evening. I believe a great partner is not just the ones that you win with, but it's when something goes wrong or changes, that ability to action it, be agile, and change the way that you're acting at that point of time. Some of our best partnerships, there's always these unforeseen circumstances that occur in this industry. It's the nature of the industry we're in. Some of the best partnerships we have are those that can be flexible and communicate with us in the best possible way.
That's great. Yeah. I think the same could be said for any sort of partnership relationship domestically, but I think that's great to point out because even more so, that's got to be emphasized from an international standpoint. It's one thing if you are a little bit off on having your client do a pickup in, somewhere in the States and you kind of have, maybe similar time zones, a similar line of communication, expectation and whatnot, but if you're dealing internationally, it's even more critical, right, that we've got a very clear and defined statement of work so everybody's on the same page, so that's great. Faye, how does the UK market compare to the US provision of service?
Okay, so overall, they're very similar. Both are mature markets. The UK has one of the most mature ITAD markets in the world, which is great. Over the years, the UK had probably been a bit ahead of the US in terms of data security. However, GDPR, though European-led, is something that has changed the playing field for everyone, and I think it has aided the US in moving forward with data protection. And I think one of the other main differences, I suppose, is in the UK, due to the geographical capability, really, is that we have a tendency, it's normal for ITADs to use their own fleet and their own collection crew for collections and bring them back to the base facility on the same day of collection, which is really, really good for partner organisations because, one, it allows it to be more manageable in terms of chain of custody because it takes that additional party out of the supply chain, which is good at helping organisations have peace of mind. Secondly, it is the control element of that we're able to get the reports through quicker, because sometimes there is that little bit of concern when you're using a partner, and especially for the first time, is it being done correctly? And one of the other things, I suppose, is the UK is probably catching up with the US in other elements too. Historically we've been not as happy to use partners as US organisations have to, because obviously the size of the landmass here makes it more difficult, and thankfully in the last couple of years that's changing, and UK-based ITADs are seeing the benefits of using partners, which is great.
Good, excellent. Ethan, what are some key aspects in building a trusted partner network?
Trust, late nights, just trust and late nights, to be fair. To build a trusted partner network, you have to trust the partner you're partnering with. Like Oliver mentioned, you've got to be proud to be with your partner, because in the day you are putting a lot of faith in them being the face of your company in front of your clients. In Australia, we have a lot of Australian organisations that are going global, and with that, I've actually got one of our global partners in the front row in South Africa. Knowing that we can trust our local partner to be in front of our client and represent Renew IT is a huge step, and probably the most key aspect. And late nights, it's being on the phone, especially the time zone differences. When you're at the bottom of the Pacific in the world, you got to be online all hours when something doesn't go to plan. I keep referencing Oliver. You mentioned projects never go to plan. Yeah. If they did, we probably wouldn't have a job. Yeah. So when the project does go slightly askew, you're there and you're prepared to action it. So, and that just comes down to building a strong and trusted partnership, with companies around the world, coming to events like this and meeting like-minded organisations. There's been numerous studies into people gravitating towards like-minded people, and I think that's prevalent in everyone in this room right here. But that can't be the only joining factor. You then look at the accreditation such as R2, ISO, and all the others. What they do is they bring credibility to an organisation. So you have trust and you also have credibility. And I believe they're two of the most key factors in building a trusted partner network.
Great. Yeah, I think those are great points, and you guys both really emphasized trust. And I think anybody here would agree, for the most part, the only way to really sustainably grow, in my opinion, an ITAD business is by having trusted partners. I think we've seen time and time again, companies that think that they can do it all on their own, set up locations all over the place, and think that they can handle every single one of their clients themselves is foolhardy at best. And I think we've got, a really good sample of evidence to show that it just doesn't work. It's too hard. It's too, you can't, have consistently predictable material flows from every single location, from every single client. And you've got to be able to be agile, whether it be project-based, whether it be client-based, whatever it may be, to really truly be able to succeed. And so, that's kind of why we're all here, right? Or one of the main reasons we're here is to be able to build those relationships and be able to service your clients and expand your business. And so trust certainly is a key aspect of that. So I think that's great. Oliver, how do you ensure a joint project methodology?
Okay, so I mentioned our project management team at CoCycle, and I truly believe they're exceptional. They're the reason we deliver our projects so successfully. We do a lot in the way of CSAT, so customer satisfaction surveys at the end of each project. I mentioned around documentation, kind of driving the way that we do things. From a project methodology standpoint, so the language that we speak, so to speak, is Prince 2 for our organization. So we have Prince 2 practitioners managing our project. Others may use PMI, others may use other Agile, whatever it might be. The reality is it's about having that open and frank discussion around what we should be doing in that project and how we manage it, report on it, monitor it as it goes forward. I think there's nothing worse than, and we've all been involved in those projects whereby you're on project call number 10, there's Gantt chart number 15, and the updates can be overwhelming and time consuming, and ultimately it's a small office closure. So there is a balancing act there. But I think, again, from going back to the partnership point, a great partnership is based upon knowing what that partner expects of you and you knowing what you expect of your partner. So if that's agreed ahead of time, and fundamentally it's, I'd like you to report this way, I'd like you to monitor the project this way, and this is what we want in terms of updates to the client, and that's all agreed ahead of time, the project has far higher chance of having a higher success rate. So on the idea of project methodologies, it's about agreeing a common language for me and how we work together and what the expectations are for the client. And just pinning back to that involves both parties being able to speak with the client. Ethan mentioned around time zones, and it's a vital thing, right? We need to know the escalation path. We need to know who actions something on our behalf if we're not available, we're sleeping. So I think there'll always be those challenges, but making sure from the outset there's an expectation that's set and that's documented. Hopefully, the project then will be more successful.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great, right? It's one thing if, like us, we're in San Diego and we've got a vendor partner over in New York doing something and they're, 3 hours, 3-hour time difference and it's happening and it's 6 a.m. for us. Well, we can probably kind of handle any sort of communication issues. When you're talking about completely different time zones and somebody doing something for you on the other side of the world and the tech can't get into the data center or whatever pops up, it's great to be able to have that type of the methodology to where you've documented exactly what's going to happen and what's that role and those escalations. And you talked about some, I think project management keywords that maybe don't necessarily always come up in the ITAD industry. And so having that type of more formal project management methodology when you're dealing with vendor partners, especially internationally. And again, the focus here is to talk about internationally why this stuff is more potentially emphasized or even more important. And so that's obviously like a key aspect of it. Faye, what certifications are a must for a UK or Irish partner?
Well, for me, I would say one of the main ones would be ADISA. ADISA was set up in 2010. It is the standard for data protection and data sanitization in within the ITAD or anything for that matter. It is now certified by endorsed by the ICO, which is part of the government in the UK, as the first and only GDPR certification, or GDPR approved certification. It is mainly a UK-based thing, but what that does show is that the organisation is dealing with data security correctly. It is also about to be approved by UCAS as an official certification, which is the UK equivalent. It's a certifying body equivalent of ANAB. The other things that are important would be the suite of ISOs, so 9001, 14001, 27001 and 45001. And although most of these aren't specific to the ITAD industry or the life cycle industry, they do show that the organisation is compliant, but most importantly that they've got the appetite to do things properly. With 27001, it is important that that particular certification is on the ITAD piece, because you can get it for other areas of the business. And the other thing to keep in mind is that it's just an official certifiable body, because some of them effectively aren't really worth the paper that they're written on. So, you know, anyone can get an ISO, but they don't have to go through the full audit process, so that needs to be mindful. And R2 as well. Although it's very much a US led thing, it's becoming more and more global. You know, we find that most organisations with a US base are requesting that, and it is, you know, becoming more prevalent in the UK and in Europe as well. And it's, although Eastward is something that's similar and also important, we find that R2 is more globally known.
Great. Actually, you bring up a great point. I was at this a year ago in Huntington Beach, and there was a panel, and I asked the question from the audience is how prevalent did the panel think that ISO 27001 is going to be moving forward? And you know, we could use another ISO like a hole in the head at this point for if you're an ITAD. It's like, how many more do we get? But, you know, of course, as you guys all know here, the market dictates what it is that you're usually going to do. And if it's clients, you know, driving for 27001, and that's kind of a lot more of the type of documentation that we're being asked for as a service provider, is at what point do you make that jump, and do you also bring on ISO 27001 as an actual certification? So I wouldn't say here, I would think, you know, would say in the US it's not maybe amongst ITADs so prevalent. What is your opinion of how prevalent it is in your market, and what do you see moving forward as far as adoption and a requirement to being 27001 moving forward?
It's definitely becoming more important to organisations. We're noticing it in RFIs nowadays, which wouldn't have been a thing before. There is such a focus on information security, and people just don't want the GDPR fines, and it's going to become bigger and probably more difficult to achieve as well.
Yep. Yeah.
I think, just to add as well, I think, you know, you mentioned about RFIs, frameworks, any sense of engaging with the public sector. So without 27001 in the UK market and European market, the reality is you don't have a business. You have a man with a van. That's the reality. So fundamentally in those markets, it's probably the highest point of authority outside of a DISA. And again, DISA's going through that certification journey, but we wouldn't be able to operate or do the business we do without 27001.
And I guess just a quick follow-up, how relevant is that for you to have partners in the US that are 27001 certified?
I'll quickly jump in there. Just
Sure,
on
sure.
Australia's a lot like the UK in the sense of, if you don't have 27001, you are just a man in the van.
Yeah.
There's no, there's one R2 V3 auditor in Australia. There's only one R2 2013 auditor in Australia, and it's the same guy. And he's booked out for the next 2 years. It took us 3 years just to get someone in country post-COVID to do a surveillance audit. How are you meant to uphold a certification when you can't physically get audited? And it's going to be interesting with auditors now booked out for the next 12 months, how that's going to shape the ITAD regulations.
I think so. Just to your second point, look, it's not vital. Not all of our partners are 27001 certified across the US. I think it massively depends as to where the business is potentially headquartered at an international level and which side you're serving. So
Sure.
if a client of ours from the UK, a multinational, was headquartered in the UK with operations in the US, I'd say that would be vital. If it were the other way round, a multinational in the US looking for NAID AAA or something else to govern the way that their data is interacted with regional sites across UK and Europe, it might not be such a driving factor. So I think it definitely depends on the decision-making profile and where that's being driven from.
Got it. So you're saying we're going to have to get certified to 27,000.
It would be a good suggestion.
And my operations manager is going to scream at me when I come back from this conference.
Yeah, you're not
Okay.
going to be very popular.
Yeah. Next, Ethan, how do you set client expectations for international projects? And maybe, I think something we talked about a little bit is maybe specifically to Australia and New Zealand and maybe some challenges that, some of us folks here aren't necessarily like up to speed on.
Honesty and transparency. It's being honest and transparent with your clients that it isn't, Renew IT going out there doing the work in Singapore, or it's not Renew IT going out there doing the work in the UK. It is our trusted partner. It's understanding that there is a clear communication strategy in place. We are still the point of escalation. We are still driving and managing the project, but it's not direct, guys in a green Renew IT shirt doing the work. A good client, a client that you'll want, will still maintain that global relationship with you. And there's no shame in owning a partnership. We look at each other as being competitors or a service provider where we need to start looking at one another as being a partner. And again, I keep saying trust. It's a trusted partner. It's as simple as that. Where we have had issues with a trusted partner is how busy everyone is. We have partners around the world, and it does get to the point where you do just have to roll up your sleeves, jump on a plane and fly to Singapore to do a data center decommission yourself. And that's still fine. You just have to address it uniquely to the situation.
Great. And then how about you being an Australian provider for, any sort of US companies? What do you find that you in particular need to communicate to ITAD partners here who you're taking care of their clientele in those regions?
When it comes to servicing providers out of the US, it's, to be fair, a lot of late nights. Because no one in the US, the US do see themselves, and there's no offense to people in the room, as the biggest in the world. And we accept that in Australia, and it's a lot of late nights dealing with the US and the UK. And it's something that we're completely okay with, and it's the communicating clearly and efficiently. So when a project is going to plan, you're sending the project report upon completion, but you're also making sure you're available during those evenings or early mornings to walk through, to answer any questions or concerns that our trusted partners may have. And it's just being clear and transparent.
Great. And kind of along those lines, Oliver, how do you best present trusted partners to clients? Whether it be from, I think a lot of us have done the standard introductory email to the client, kind of explaining who's who and what roles, but anything else that you in particular do to best make that introduction?
Sure. So I think, again, just on the point of ADISA, because maybe those of you in the US haven't interacted with that certification so much. We're on the road to ADISA compliance ourselves at the moment. ADISA actually mandates it now. So the idea of white labeling partners and presenting it as your solution, it can't be done. The sub-processor has to be there. If a partner comes to us, an international partner, and they say to us, we'd like you to go in as us as opposed to yourselves, the first thing we will say is, look, there's going to be so much of that value lost in the sales cycle then, right? We've got a world-class portal at CoScycle. Our certifications will all say CoScycle at the top of them. Our data destruction certification will say CoScycle. We're a Blanco authorized partner. That says CoScycle. So unless we're purposefully removing that information or editing certification before it goes back to our international partner, we're presenting something which is falsified. So I understand why people have done it in the past, and maybe there's a bit of disregard to NDAs, and it's the trust element again. So as Ethan says, trust, is that part there. We should be proud of the partnerships, like I said previously. And for us, we present our international partners as an extension of our own team. It's built on continually successfully delivering projects time and time again, and therefore the trust increases, and therefore you get to know each other's business more. And over time, you're able, the time zone thing again, to pick up the phone when you need them. Like I mentioned previously, right, the best partnerships are examined not when everything's going right, it's when it's going wrong. And for me, I want for the client, and likewise if we support your clients, to know we're accountable and you can have the assurance that we are going to be that local trusted partner.
Yep, that's great. I mean, we share the exact same process and kind of idea at Avertech. We want to make sure that, our vendor partner has the direct communication with the client. We think it's the best way to go. We've always kind of been that way, and we've never thought that, we're going to pretend like we're, in all places at all times, and those are our people. I think it goes back to, I think your most successful clientele if you're genuine, honest up front, and you set the standard that way, and maybe there's going to be clients that doesn't work for, and that's okay. Maybe that's not the right client for you. There's nothing worse than bringing on a bad client and having to deal with all the headaches that come from it, and many times they end up not even being that great of a revenue driver or that great of an experience. And so I think being upfront, honest, and kind of all these things that you guys are talking about is key in not only communicating with your vendor partner network, but with clients.
And just to add to that, Ed, I think as well, what we've seen is, like you say, you can't be everywhere at once. You can't be the best in every region. What would our client's preference be, right? You're working with CoCycle and then a trusted partner in region that's been in that region for ages, understands the certification, understands the landscape, can add real value. Or should CoCycle hire one guy in a van and put them in the middle of Central America to serve America? And that's the thing, and I see it so often with international business expansion strategies, and we're not going to name any names with some of the multinational ITADs, but they want to be everywhere, but what they're actually operating as an everywhere is almost like a franchise model. Each person can independently do it how they want to, rather than having a common standardized approach. So I think partnerships, I suppose what I'm getting at, partnerships don't just allow for the best possible service, but it's an optimized approach for your client, which will give them better value and better service.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Sorry, just to add to that as well, it's reputation. Going on Google, you're looking at Google rating. What's going to come up, a positive review or a good review? If you go to a restaurant, you're not going to give them a 5-star Google review. You're going to give them, if you have a crap meal, give them 1 star. Yep. And that's all that's going to be seen, and that damages your reputation. So you have to partner with the right company, but also make sure that you have the right clients. We're all chasing that bottom dollar, but unfortunately, you can't put a cost on reputation.
Yeah, that's a great point. Faye, explain to us the fundamental issues of Brexit and how it may pose a challenge to any ITAD projects. This is, in particular for me, extremely intriguing. I don't know how many of you are up to speed on Brexit and the exact particulars of what is allowed and not allowed, and kind of especially what Faye will speak to here. But this was for me really intriguing to hear about, and kind of what kind of challenges Brexit poses to these projects.
So Brexit is something that I feel has been talked about for years now, but it's really only actually come into play properly because of the transition periods. But pre-Brexit and pre the ending of the transition period, it was really easy for organisations to do pan-European business. There was no restrictions on movement or transfer of data, of people, of equipment across borders. There was none of that. So it was relatively easy for people to organise ferries, bring equipment from anywhere in Europe into the UK, and vice versa, sale of equipment and all of that. But that's now changed. Because now the UK has third nation status, it does mean that there are now customs checks, there's border controls, there's actual physical checks on items going, and the paperwork is insane. FIDA, as I said earlier, we're in a very unique and lucky situation. Our head office is in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, because of the Northern Ireland Protocol, has both EU and UK status. So it means that we can actually bring equipment in from both Europe and from the UK. We can sell to Europe and sell to the UK. We can do it cost effectively because we don't have to put as much effort into the customs paperwork creation and actually trying to find out what we need to do, which works really well. You know, and ultimately we work with a lot of UK and European-based ITADs to help them support this side of things. So if you do already have a partner that is doing work for you in the UK or Europe, and you need to be able to, you know, have equipment move between countries, or do, you know, have people or resources, then speak to your partner and tell them about, you know, utilising us, because we can help them. But it's a huge challenge, and like, to be honest, we thought that it was, you know, it was going to be more difficult for us initially as well, but it has actually worked out so far not too bad.
Just a very brief point to add there on the GDPR side of things. So as a result of Brexit, there was some nervousness at the time as to whether GDPR would still be the regulatory kind of framework, if you like, you have to move towards, right? And you have to mitigate that risk. It still currently is. So it's an EU directive, GDPR is. We've left the EU, but UK has very much said at this stage they're going to continue to be bound by GDPR. So to give that confidence in the way that we operate, they're not going to create something else in the interim. So I follow that closely. I know you follow it closely as well. But as it currently stands, the GDPR certainly applies to the UK, because there's sometimes that ambiguity with our partners. Well, are you guys outside of GDPR now? No, it's absolutely GDPR.
Great. And for us dumb Americans, the UK, so we understand this. And I'm telling you, like, this is not something I think we really understand very well. We have the Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, correct? Then we've got a separate area. We've got Britain, and we've got an actual physical geographic separation. And with Ireland, it's literally why this Brexit thing is such a huge thing. And I don't think people really here really like grasp it. So why don't you guys just do a really quick like briefer on specifically from a geographical standpoint, how the movement of goods, and we talk about this because as you guys know, there's a lot of data center work and a lot of things happening in Ireland and in the UK in general, kind of how that affects cross-border movement as an example if something is happening in the Republic of Ireland and it needs to go somewhere else.
So Faye's from Northern Ireland, so maybe I'll let her talk about the Northern Ireland Protocol, but yeah, go ahead, Faye. So you can ship between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland with absolutely no issue whatsoever. You can ship into the Republic of Ireland from anywhere else in the EU with no problem whatsoever, and you can ship from Northern Ireland to the UK with no problem. Or sorry, well, we are in the UK, but to GB, Great Britain, and you can ship from GB, so England, Scotland, and Wales, to Northern Ireland with absolutely no problem whatsoever. But whenever you try to go about it a different way and want to bring something directly from, say, Spain into the UK, then you've got the customs paperwork, as I talked about. You've got the physical checks. There are sometimes delays, and like, you know, even at the ports, there's still delays getting onto boats and things like that. So it has presented a huge challenge. But then it also affects workers. So there's only a certain amount of days per year that you can actually have people working in Europe if you are a UK-based citizen. And I think the prevention method is, right, you know, they didn't want to create further any separation within Northern Ireland and Ireland, right? So putting physical border checks there under the Good Friday Agreement could lead to issues, right? So the idea of it being a free and open border was to ensure that trade could continue, but ultimately as well on the social side of things, there's no further issues over in Ireland. So I mean, how are VITA looking at that? Because that's a moving piece at the moment all the time, isn't it? You know, you look at the news and you see what Boris Johnson, or not Boris Johnson, should I say now, you know, right, Rishi or Liz Truss, whoever's coming in next. You follow this and you sit there going, the EU want to put in more areas there because they can see as, right, there's some tactical benefits to the Irish community. And on the other hand, the current PM, or the PM's office, I should say, is sitting there and trying to not do that. So it's a moving target for us, and we're actually over there facing it. How are you guys kind of?
Yeah,
Why don't you give us a dissertation on the socioeconomic issues in Ireland and Northern Ireland?
It is. It's definitely moving. The thing is, the whole way through the Brexit negotiations, it was constantly coming out that something was going to happen, this was going to happen, that was going to happen, and most of them didn't. So we have to take it all with a pinch of salt until somebody comes out and actually tells us what's going to change. And
Right.
it's going to be difficult for them to change from what's already agreed because, as Ollie has mentioned, the Good Friday Agreement, peace in Ireland is pretty important to lots of other countries in the world. So that's really the crux of it.
Yeah, hopefully you guys can take away some of that, and is something to learn and take back, and again, realize why you want to work with these trusted partners in these regions who have to deal with these type of issues, literally on a daily basis. Last question here I've got for Ethan. What are some key differences in working with ITADs versus MSPs versus VARs? So all the different types of organizations that you may be working with in a ITAD project.
I think what's a trend that's come out of COVID is the ITAD industry has evolved. We're no longer just an ITAD. A lot of ITADs now do a lot of managed service work. So Renew IT, we acquired a managed service provider in November last year. So we're now no longer an ITAD. We're a IT asset lifecycle management business, something that we've tried to find that middle ground between ITAD and being a service provider. So I feel that's the difference between ITAD and a service provider are very minimal. I think it's more so between a vendor, and you just have to address it based on the opportunity itself. Some opportunities you may have to go through a vendor, others you won't have to. Ultimately, if you go through a vendor, they're just going to use an ITAD anyway. So do you want to put in a middleman, just going to muddy the waters without having a clear communication strategy, or are you going to empower yourself to choose that final service provider? So I think it does just have to be addressed by a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd lean to more towards using an ITAD that, like we keep going on about today, is an ITAD that we can trust.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm sure you guys have all seen it, MSPs and who say that they do, ITAD for their clientele, but really they don't. They're just like, they've got it on their website, but you dig into it and they're just using, ITAD partners. And so it's, I believe in that kind of delineation. I think it's, specialization within the ITAD world is important. And I think there's a lot of kind of differences between like those two, but, it's case by case, it might make sense obviously for your company and for a lot of other companies to bring that into the fold and, kind of vice versa. So that's it as far as questions that I've got. I don't know how we're doing on time. I don't want to take too much time here, but I'd be happy to open it up to the floor. If anybody's got any questions they want to ask of our distinguished panel here, I'll leave it up to you guys. Anybody? Oh, here we go. How about right in the front here?
I'm just curious, when you sign these contracts, don't you get a separate agreement within your own geographies?
You're talking about contracts with clientele?
Yeah, I mean, like I signed a master agreement with IBM as an example, sitting in the US. But in the UK, the IBM subsidiary in the UK is its own
Does their own?
legal entity and
Sure. Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, it depends on the client. It depends on the client and what works best for them. It's a good question because we've got a big client we've been chasing for a long time, and it's their philosophy. Every kind of region handles their own as far as like who they're like kind of like using. Obviously the problem with that is if you go down that road, you've got somebody over here having a great experience with an ITAD or service provider and somebody in another region having the total opposite if you leave it up to them, and so we're working with them.
depending on the client,
Yeah, we're working with them on bringing it all under one umbrella and us coming in there and then, managing the process so the lines of communication are consistent. I think that, a big part of the value you bring as an ITAD to a large global entity, as an example, is your communication and your information, right? Your platform. Do you have a client portal? How accessible is that client portal? How consistent is the information, right? Even all the way down to details from a make, model, really much more specific even than that. And once you kind of are doing that and you're in charge of really creating that consistent line of communication back to the client, you're bringing value. That's your value in your communication with the other ITADs. The actual work itself, valuable and you want to do it, but really a lot of times all we're doing is just literally providing that consistency of communication and coordination with other partners, and that's what we bring to the table, and that's why this is such a huge topic and why I'm, particularly was so, excited to moderate this, is because I want to learn more for our clientele about international, partners and what we can do. So I'll let you guys answer that how you wish.
Well, for us, our contracts it's the same contract. We have them written in a way that it covers both the UK and Europe. So fundamentally, there's not much difference because, as Ollie has pointed out, that the UK has continued with GDPR, so they have written exactly the same law. So there isn't a huge amount of difference when it comes to that. When you're talking about other countries, it'd be more about the SOW than it would be the actual contract for us.
Yeah, I think, fantastic question, by the way. So CodeCycle support a number of multinational clients, one of those in particular, 90 regions around the world. During that engagement process, when we were deciding who we would partner with to support that contract, we actively moved away from standardization. And what I mean by that is we actively sat there and said, why aren't we looking at what's apparent to that client in each continent? At the continental level, the regulatory directive, making sure they adhere to those standards in the continent. So part of that is the kind of discovery exercise, making sure that there's a stakeholder engagement from the client. So if there's a head of compliance in the US, a head of compliance in the EU, a head of compliance in Africa, for example, that they're all engaged in that process, and then building that appendix into the master service contract to sit there and say, if this data's received in this region, it's treated this way, which might be different to another region, and here's the certification standard at the end of it. So it's very rare you actively move against standardization on a global opportunity, but by doing that, there's a very robust contract that makes sure from an international level, they're compliant in every single region.
Yeah, that's great.
Adding to that, the SOW, what we found is almost acts as an amendment to the original MSA or an NDA that you have with your client. Everyone's working from home now. I don't know if you guys are still having it in America, but getting employees back into the office in Australia is impossible. The fact is that because a lot of Australians have moved overseas, so they physically can't get to the office without travelling for 28 hours like we did getting here. So when you are doing an international project, on paper, they're an Australian employee, but they're living in San Francisco. So all of a sudden, you're retrieving a single laptop from San Francisco or Mumbai or Singapore. That's when you do have to have that a global partnership network.
Yep, I've done a full presentation on work from home. So I'm with you 100% on that and where we're going to be seeing that trend go. There was another question in the back I wanted to make sure not to skip over.
Yeah, you guys had a lot of really great conversation about the importance to flexibility, the importance to having some flexibility in the project management. When you first start working with like a domestic partner here in the United States, what do you find is the biggest challenge? Is just even building that relationship or just even getting off the ground?
Great question.
So we, if you don't mind, so we start initially off with the documentation, right? We need to know each other's certificates and that kind of knowledge share. The relationship and the partner culture comes over time, and that comes, and it's that magic word again, with trust. For us, we're very reluctant to move away from trusted partnerships. What we tend to do is optimize over time based upon region, right? If someone starts to impress us in one region, but maybe they're subbing out our work in another region, we sit there and say, that can be improved. And you self-examine in that respect. So I think the initial starting point, what we like to see at CodeCycle, and I'm very positive in this room, where we're working with a few of you guys, is that proactive approach. It shouldn't matter that it's our client in the UK and you're supporting us in the US, and the opportunity might not be as large for you in the US. For our client, they want that same care quality service throughout. So I think for us, we look for proactive partners and partners that sit there and say, did you know you could do it this way? Did you know it's different? you're talking to them about UK standards. Let me come into the conversation to talk about US standards. So those that want to engage with our partners to see the opportunity will then naturally receive more business from us because we can open up that partner to others of our clients. So one thing I think Kozack are very good at is once we see someone delivering something well for us, we almost become your co-selling business, right? We're selling you as our partner to others of our clients, and then the business increases. Some of our key clients on this side of the pond, so to speak, we do a huge amount with, and that is down to the partnership working at the starting point. So, for me, it's the certification standards, building good documentation between us so we both know who's doing what and why they're doing it and where they're doing it and when they're going to do it by, and then delivering on those promises. And, as we said earlier, if something bad happens, being accountable and stepping up and saying, look, this has happened, but this is how I'm going to fix it. So, yeah, that's for me. Hopefully that answers your question. Cheers.
So being open and honest with the partner, obviously the partnership can work both ways, where VITA could be looking for a US ITAD to carry out services, or the US ITAD could be looking for VITA to carry out services. But we have a formal onboarding process, which part of that is actually having a Teams meeting with the the stakeholders and getting to understand the business, what makes them tick, and what's understanding their customers as well, and getting to know things as early on in the process as possible. And I think that's key.
Sure.
It's also setting the expectations, and that needs to be set extremely early during the partner onboarding program. You must have an established partner onboarding program where you do vet the company, but you also are measuring their performance, and that can just come down to responsiveness and accuracy to detail. Just echoing your sentiments raised before was consistency of service. You need to make sure that how we're servicing at Renew IT in Australia is matched in the likes of South Africa, Singapore, and throughout Southeast Asia and Europe. So consistency is key when it comes to this type of work.
Cool, great. I think that's we're running a little late on our time, so that's the full session. I want to thank our panelists here today and thank every one of you for coming. Thank you.